So greetings and welcome to the annual Power Hour. We're doing this event for a number of years now, but you could argue that this year's conversation will be the most important or certainly the most interesting. Our leaders have been faced with unprecedented challenges over the last year, and we'll ask them about the year that was and the year to come in just a moment. Our sponsors are an important part of our event, and we are pleased that not only have our sponsors continued to support the event, but a few have joined us this year. Our sponsors are Cherney Realty, Cody and James Chartered Professional Accountants, and the Peterborough and District Construction Association. Our knowledge sponsors are Merit Precision Moldings, Microage Peterborough and Whitby, Canopy Support Services, and TD. And our partner sponsor since we started, our power sponsor is Cogeco Your TV. And it's a pleasure to welcome Matt Wickham, who is the Vice President, General Manager, Ontario, to bring you greetings and an update on Cogeco Your TV. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Stuart. And you'll note that I managed to do the first rule of COVID-19 and take myself off mute. So we're off to a flying start. On behalf of all my colleagues at Cogeco, I'm so pleased to be here today. I've heard a lot about the Power Hour. And first off, I just want to recognize the Peterborough Chamber of Commerce. Like so many other chambers right across the province, they've never been more important than in the past year. I'm so particularly impressed with their work supporting and advocating for local businesses like Peterborough Yoga or Mirror, helping them navigate funding and advocate for funding and emergency support programs. In a way, the Chamber and Cogeco are working to accomplish similar things. We're both passionate about growing local businesses and connecting them to the world. Cogeco serves more than 600 communities across Ontario and Quebec. But our footprint isn't the big metropolitan areas. Our communities, our markets are the size of Peterborough, Kingston, and Windsor. And providing world-class networks in each of these communities is important to us. But being local and active in the community is equally important. I wanted to give you an example. The pandemic has been hard on everyone, but perhaps none more so than those working in long-term care homes. We have all heard the horror stories about the outbreaks in some of these facilities, and yet these heroes continue to go to work, caring for some of our most vulnerable. We wanted to show them how much they were appreciated. So, starting this month, Cogeco will be delivering lunch to staff at over 30 long-term care homes across Ontario. Literally thousands of lunches in the coming weeks for nurses, PSWs, housekeeping, and recreation staff. It's just a small gesture of thanks for members of our community that are carrying such an important but heavy load. In fact, just moments ago, our team was at St. Joseph's at Fleming, delivering a hearty lunch to over 170 staff. And we're proud to say that we purchased those lunches at the Ashburnham Ale House. This past year has taught us a quick lesson on how important connectivity has become at work and especially at home. Even before the pandemic, we were concentrating on connecting underserved and unserved households and businesses while supporting the Canadian government in its objective to connect all Canadians by 2030. In fact, currently we have more than 70 projects as part of the Government of Canada's Rapid Response Stream and Universal Broadband Fund. And in this sense, I did want to recognize the leadership of Minister Monsef in addressing the digital divide and positioning Canada in the digital economy. Connectivity will spur economic growth, but we must keep in mind that it's also an important social issue. High-speed internet is now an essential service that supports education, health, and society in general. And communities that are not connected struggle to grow and be active contributors in the Canadian economy. And this is where we come in. The telecommunications as a whole, and Cogeco in particular, have a key role and a responsibility to contribute to economic development. Cogeco has committed over $1 billion over the next 4 years in building our powerful fiber networks, and we're just getting started. I want to thank the Peterborough Chamber for organizing the Power Hour. It's an incredible opportunity to hear from all levels of government at one event. At Cogeco, we're proud to support the Chamber and be today's power sponsor. Enjoy the discussion and thanks.
Thank you, Matt. We really appreciate your comments. We also appreciate the support of Cogeco Your TV as not only a service provider for us, but also a supporter of the business community and now some of our frontline. Okay, let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce your moderator for this year's Power Hour, Joe Grant. Joe is a lawyer at LLF Lawyers here in Peterborough. His practice specialties include business and not-for-profit, municipal law, and real estate. Joe is also a long-term volunteer with the Chamber, including his role as the 2021 Chamber of Commerce Chair of the Board. Take it away, Joe.
Thank you, Stu, and thank you, Matt. And welcome everyone to the 2021 Greater Peterborough Chamber of Commerce Power Hour. Our last Power Hour was held on February 12th, 2020. At that time, COVID-19 had not even been declared a pandemic. In fact, if it was on anybody's radar at all, here it was a distant curiosity. A year later, we find ourselves recalling the incredible toll the pandemic has taken on our world, our country, and our region. Our business community is at the same time assessing the impact that the pandemic has had on their businesses while anxiously predicting how the final chapters will be written and preparing to meet the challenges and opportunities of the coming months. Like never before, I would argue, we are engaged and invested in the decisions of our elected representatives. So we are really looking forward to this opportunity to hear from all of our guests today. The perennial topics of Power Hour, housing, development, business growth, infrastructure, and tourism have all been impacted by the pandemic, and all of these will be certainly touched on this afternoon. Of course, like all of our businesses, the Power Hour has itself been impacted by the pandemic, and like so many of our businesses, we have adapted. Joining us today, as always, but for the first time virtually, are our region's municipal, federal, and provincial elected representatives. In alphabetical order, and please hold your applause till the end, His Worship J. Murray Jones, Warden of the County of Peterborough, the Honorable Miriam Monsef, Member of Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha, Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Minister for Rural Economic Development, the Honorable Dave Smith, Member of Provincial Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha, Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, and Her Worship Diane Tarian, Mayor of the City of Peterborough. Your 2021 Power Hour panel. Thank you. Now, today's questions have been submitted by our membership. I'm going to provide a brief background and then pose the question. Everyone will receive approximately 1 minute to respond, and we'll go through the list in order. We're going to start alphabetically. So my first question will be answered by Warden Jones and then Minister Monsef, going down the list. Then we'll rotate the first answer to the second question to Minister Monsef and end with Warden Jones. This isn't a test. Don't worry, I will announce your names. It's on me. And I will let you know when we've hit 1 minute by simply raising my hand. So if you just keep an eye out for that. Very, very technically sophisticated. And I also want to mention, although this is not a debate, if a response by one of our guests references another guest or a policy of theirs, that person may request an opportunity to respond. But I would ask that you please use your challenges sparingly, as we are trying to keep the Power Hour to approximately an hour anyway. For our audience, feel free to submit questions in the chat window. We have a crack team reviewing questions as they come in. Keep in mind, we will not be able to get to all questions before the end of the event, and we also will likely consolidate questions with similar themes to those that have already been submitted. Any questions?
Will you repeat that, Joe?
Oh, you got it. Okay.
No.
Welcome everybody to the. So, Mr. Jones, thank you, Warden Jones, for taking yourself off mute, because the first question goes to you. You were listening. It concerns infrastructure deficits. Maybe not the most sexiest topic, but still it is something that I know that you're concerned with, and a lot of our panelists are. By infrastructure deficit, we mean the difference between funding of needed for maintenance and repair, and rehabilitation, replacement of existing deteriorated infrastructure, common examples being roads, bridges, sewers, and the funding available from all sources, including taxes, government subsidies, and grants. Now, according to the government's own data that we have, our region has been facing a large infrastructure deficits for some time. The county's, I believe, is over 80 million over the next 8 years, if I'm correct. So, Warden Jones, to you first, should addressing this deficit be a priority, and why, and what are we doing to make up this deficit?
Okay, infrastructure deficit has been hounding Peterborough County for a number of years now. We have so many bridges, we have so many roads, way more than people probably understand. It's a huge county. It's 6 times the size of the GTA, which is hard to get your head around. But right now, and 80, 90 million, I think, is the latest figure deficit that we do have. And it would take that much money just to repair the infrastructure that we have now. Never mind build any new infrastructure. So that's always been a challenge for Peterborough County. Absolutely no question about it. Now, we have started each year in our budget to have a 2.5% increase dedicated solely to infrastructure, because we've got to start eating away at that. So our budget this year, for example, had the 2.5 for infrastructure, but the rest of it actually went down from last year. But it's absolutely critical. People take our infrastructure for granted. They want to drive from Apsley to Lakefield, and they don't realize that the roads are there that we have to maintain. So infrastructure is probably our biggest bugaboo, and it's really nice to see you wave at me in such a friendly way. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden Jones. Minister Monsef.
Joe, I think that Jay captured the need for infrastructure really quite well, and municipal leaders have done an excellent job in advocating for gas tax transfers to be doubled. These are flexible funds that go directly to municipalities to do with as they wish. The Canada Infrastructure Agreement that we have with provinces is the largest one in history. And we've been rolling out funds that support the Causeway, for example. That's been the biggest infrastructure investment in our county. The Trent Severn Waterway, hundreds of millions of dollars invested. We've been supporting clean water in our communities, and also moving forward with clean water at Curve Lake. They're at the design stage for their treatment plan. The Mount Julian Viamede Road in North Kawartha, Beaver Lake Road in Trent Lakes. We're making historic investments in infrastructure. We have more good news coming in the near future, and we do that in partnership with the province. The province nominates projects to the federal government, and we approve them. We've cut red tape. Those approval processes now take 6 weeks. So Peterborough, keep applying.
Very good. Thank you, Miriam. MPP Smith.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. I forgot that unlike when we're in committee, the committee clerk actually turns our mics on. I had to do it. I apologize for that delay. Miriam was right. We have the ICIP program, the Investing in Canadian Infrastructure program, that is joint. It's actually a three-way program where the municipality picks up a portion of the cost, the province picks up a portion of the cost, and the federal government picks up a portion of the cost. And it demonstrates that there is that partnership, that we all recognize that we have to work together. On top of that, the province offers debenture loans for municipalities for it. And just recently, there was about $25 million that the city of Peterborough took advantage of. Part of that is going to be the rebuilding of Park Hill Road. It's always going to be an ongoing process when you're looking at infrastructure. You never have enough money to do all the things that you need to do. So you end up prioritizing what they are. And I'll throw one out in particular that is not part of the city of Peterborough, but it demonstrates that it takes a bit of time to do some of these things. And that's Fish Hatchery Road out near Havelock. It's been on our radar now for a number of years. It's one that hasn't had any maintenance done to it because there's been questions about who actually owns the road. But ultimately, we have to make sure that transportation is something that's looked after for everyone.
Thank you, MPP Smith. Mayor Therrien.
Thank you very much, Joe. And absolutely, infrastructure dollars are a big problem in the city as well. As the warden said, we have tight budget cycles, and we every year spend time sort of debating how we're going to, what the tax increase is going to be specifically for capital projects. And even then, we know that there is this deficit of to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars in the city of Peterborough. So roads get talked about a lot. Another major concern that we see increasingly is around water management, flood 2004. And as we see increasingly sort of erratic weather patterns, freezing, melting, thawing, we need to be conscious of that. So the city's been really proactive in allocating funds to some of those priority projects that will protect those areas that are prone to flooding. So downtown in particular, there's a lot of work happening around Jackson Creek. And we continue to have a index on our road reconstruction in terms of those that are failing. We have a lot of roads, sometimes I call them reverse speed bumps, but the potholes that we all deal with, they're expensive to maintain. So it's about responsible allocation of those funds. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mayor Terrion. Reverse speed bumps. Okay, if I didn't learn anything else for today, that's you gave me a good phrase. So turning now to our second question, and we're going to start with Minister Monsef for this one. We are already seeing the economic and growth benefits of the completed Highway 407. Via Rail currently has a plan for high-frequency rail connecting Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and Quebec City. This proposed dedicated passenger rail line will run through the Kawarthas with, of course, a stop in Peterborough. This proposal will further open our region to larger markets and increase its desirability as a destination to live and enjoy. But it will require funding, careful planning, and the coordination of all governments. What are you doing to ensure the VIA high-frequency rail proposal moves ahead?
Great question, Joe. And I have been advocating for the VIA Rail high-frequency project since I got started as your member of parliament. And it's been really helpful to have the full support of the community behind it. The government of Canada has already invested in supporting, new fleet, new rail cars have been purchased. We had an agreement previously to address the freight side of things with the province. And we've got a new Minister of Transport now in charge. Mark Garneau was my seatmate. So as the former transport minister, he heard a lot from me about every day, are we chugging along on this project? And just recently had a conversation with Minister Alghabra about this. He too sees the value in this project. And so you can be sure that I'll continue to push this forward. And, we have an opportunity to honor the memories of folks like Tony Smith, who worked so hard to bring this project to life. And I look forward to the day when that first shovel goes into the ground. I think Peterborough is going to be at the front of the line when the business case for this development is finalized.
Yes, I'm sure we can all echo those comments about Tony Smith and what a great role he's played over the years, in the last 15 years since I've been back in Peterborough. Absolutely. MPP Smith.
Thanks, Joe. And I'm going to echo those comments about Tony Smith. Really, we wouldn't be talking about rail coming back to Peterborough if it wasn't for Tony. He was instrumental with the Shining Waters Railway. He put a great deal of his life into this, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to know that Via Rail has committed to naming something after him. It could be the train terminal here in Peterborough, or it could be one of the train lines itself, the Tony Smith Express, so to speak. Provincially, what we've done is we've held the spots at Union Station for it. There has been expansion of GO Train, but that expansion of GO Train is not going to have any negative effect on this. We recognize that getting people from downtown Peterborough down to Union Station in under an hour is going to be a very beneficial thing for us. You mentioned the opening of the 407. We're seeing people coming into this area that probably would not have had they not had that easy access with the 407. With high-speed rail or high-frequency rail, I think that we will see that much more of an influx of people.
Absolutely, and getting people from Union Station to Peterborough as well, right? Going now to Mayor Terrion. Mayor Terrion, what are we doing at the city level?
Yeah, great question, Joe. And I actually, myself and the two transportation co-chairs, Councillor Capo and Councillor Vassiliadis, met with VIA executives last week to talk about the project, to get an update, and also to hear about how the city can be supporting it. So, they let us know that municipalities in Quebec have been a bit more active than some of them in Ontario. And so we're working on getting a motion to have a letter of support. We had sent one some years back, but getting an updated letter of support for this project is something that council is going to be bringing forward, I believe, at our council meeting on Monday, given the constraints around the timing and the federal budget and the need to want to make sure that our advocacy is in on that piece. So we're working on that, continuing to have discussions about how else we can help out with this project at the municipal level, because as was said by MPP Smith and MP Monsef, a very important project, and one that will bring, you know, a lot of growth to our area, which I'm sure we'll talk about further into the conversation about some of the, you know, the ripple effects that will have. But certainly I hear from folks, my mom used to take the train to Peterborough back in the day, and that was before my time, but I would love to be able to do that again. So the city is certainly supportive of it and working however we can to facilitate the project.
Thank you, Mayor. Warden Jones.
Okay, thank you very much. That's always the benefit of going last. Everything is usually said. And I can't get over, Joe, how friendly you are with your waving. It's a little overdone. But anyway, yeah, very important to Peterborough County. I think that's a penetrating look into the obvious. That, along with the 407, has got huge potential for all of us. And, you know, Tony Smith, I had the privilege of sitting on that Shining Waters Committee for a number of years. And there's another name that needs a pat in the back, and that's Dean Belmastro. He had a lot to do with this in the early stages, so I don't want to forget him either. But as far as the county's concerned, of course, passenger rail is important, and we get it, and ditto to what everyone said. But it's the freight traffic that also needs a little bit of attention. We have industries out in that end of the county, out in the Havelock area, Unaman Mines and Darrell Drains Enterprises, who drastically need freight capacity. So we need to get these lines updated to include that as well. So we're 100% supporting this, and I'm doing my best to keep Miriam on track.
Excellent. Thank you, Warden Jones, and thank you, everybody.
You were all in trouble if Warden Jones is keeping me in track.
Okay, moving
He
on.
just needs to make some puns, right?
Question 3, and for everybody at home, I have no control over the mute button, so I am honoring or hoping that our panel will school themselves and be able to hold off.
You better talk to Miriam about that.
For a third question, we're going to go to MPP Smith. And I have a feeling I know that I'm going to get a to be continued response perhaps to this one, but let's try it anyway. One of the biggest shifts we've seen the last year is people working from home and operating business from home. One's ability to do this requires reliable and fast internet service. The shift has shone a light on something people in the county outside of the city have known for years. Download and upload speeds in many part of our rural areas are abysmal, and something needs to be done. The question, what are we doing to make sure that everybody in the region has access to proper high-speed internet, and why is it taking so long?
Anytime you have something that is infrastructure based, it's going to take a period of time to do it. We recognize at the province that if you're not in e-business, you're going to be out of business. And high-speed internet is something that absolutely has to be done for everyone. There is the universal broadband project that the federal government has put forward with $1.7 billion. On top of that, Ontario has created the ICON, which is high-speed internet, and we're investing a further $1 billion into it. So when you put the two of them together, Ontario's portion from the feds, plus the $1 billion from the province of Ontario, we're looking at about $1.6, $1.7 billion in total that will be spent in Ontario. EORN project, the SWIFT project, those are great examples of how we would do it. There's a lot of different ways that we can do it, but it is something that is very, very important. If you're looking at the agriculture side, and this is something that a lot of people don't recognize, if you want to go to the automated robotic milking, you need to have high-speed internet available to you to maintain that. And that can reduce the herd of cattle by 50% and still increase the amount of production that they get from it. So it's something that we absolutely must get finished.
Excellent, thank you, MPP Smith. Next, Mayor Therrien.
Thank you very much. So Tuesday, I had a meeting of the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus, which I'm the chair of. And yesterday, we had a meeting of the Eastern Ontario Leadership Council. And tomorrow, and I'm sure the warden will speak more to this, there's going to be an announcement from the Eastern Ontario Regional Network about this issue specifically. So the Eastern Ontario group has been advocating for this for many years. And we're finally going to have a public announcement and see some of that work coming to fruition. Because when we're talking about business, of course, that's really important. It's also really important to talk about affordability and equitability. So kids that are learning from home these days too, if you don't have reliable internet or if your family can't afford high-speed internet, that's an issue that puts kids behind in education as well. So it's impacting every aspect of our lives these days. So it's something that we're continuing to push on. And I was glad to bring Peterborough to the table at the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus on that front. And I know Warden Jones will talk more about the EORN project and thank him for his leadership on that front.
It's a great segue. Warden Jones, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And that is a subject that is near and dear to my heart, as Diane said. Tomorrow, about 11:30, there's going to be a huge, major announcement. And this is an EORN project. It's the Cell Gap project. And thank you so much to the federal government and the provincial government for making this happen, and all the municipalities in Eastern Ontario, including the city of Peterborough and the county of Peterborough. And we have a huge announcement that you're going to love. But high-speed internet is absolutely touching everything we talk about. The Eastern Ontario Regional Network, which I have the honor of chairing, are promoting a 1 gig project, and that is getting 1 gig fiber to 95% of the homes in all of Eastern Ontario. We know how to do it. We've done it before. We can hit the ground running, and we can't afford not to do it. So Miriam, I'm not going to say she's sick of hearing from me, because she's not. She's been very supportive, but there's a lot of hoops to go through. But we need to get this done. The Eastern Ontario Regional Network, the Warden's Caucus, the Mayor's Caucus, we've got it figured out. We've got to do this, and we've got to do it right now. And thank you for waving at me.
You're very welcome, Warden Jones. Minister Monsef.
Well, my colleagues explained why it's important to have that connectivity. It's hard to not have high-speed internet in the best of times, but in the middle of COVID, with loved ones in long-term care homes, with little ones trying to learn online, with businesses pivoting to digital, with the need to stay connected, that connectivity is essential. So we're in our second mandate as a government. We're in phase 2 of rolling out our plan for connectivity. We announced $1.75 billion in grants, and then there's $2 billion in loans through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. These are zero interest loans, and the bank will support the projects that are viable. There were 2 separate streams. One was for projects that could get shovels into the ground this construction season and wrap up this year. Another stream for projects, as Dave said, that take longer. And we've already started approving projects, right? We started in Alberta and in BC, in Ontario, in Sudbury, in Perth, Wellington, in Niagara Falls, and Niagara West. There are tens of thousands of households in Canada who had connectivity at the end of last year. Because of our investments, there will be 250,000 more at the end of this year having that connectivity because of investments we made in our first mandate. And that's above and beyond what the Universal Broadband Fund is going to do. And as my colleague said, this is an all hands on deck. It's going to take the telcos investing. It's going to take provinces, municipalities being on board. And the challenges that we'll have, Joe, as I wrap up, is the shared infrastructure, the poles that allow for that fiber to go through. And of course, we can't have the move to the 21st century without reliable cell service. And tomorrow's announcement will be a good one. Maybe J. Murray Jones will spill all the details before this thing is over. Maybe he won't. Stay tuned.
I already tried to get an early announcement, but I don't think it's going to happen. But we're certainly looking forward to tomorrow. Everybody out there, stay tuned. Hopefully the people in the county that are watching it, your screens didn't freeze up too much when we were telling you. 11:30 tomorrow, big announcement. I'm going to switch gears now. This question, the first one is going to go to Mayor Therrien, and it's about housing. Now, According to the Peterborough and Kawarthas Association of Realtors, residential real estate prices have jumped 33% in the last year, with the average home selling for $662,000 as of February. This is a striking departure from the 28% decline that was prognosticated early in the pandemic. We are seeing an increase in the desirability of housing here, while availability and affordability are decreasing. Simply, how do we balance growth with affordability? Mayor Terry.
This is the constant struggle that's been facing, this community, and we're not unique in this. Again, the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus, this is affecting Belleville, Cornwall, everywhere. Especially as folks are able to work from home, they're able to buy property in smaller communities, moving out of the GTA. So it's difficult because the municipality has very limited tools to regulate any of that. We can't. But what we're doing at the city is ensuring that we're trying to speed up any new developments. There's several in the queue, particularly around apartments and rentals, which we know are in high demand. Single family homes are continuing to chug along, you see particularly in the North End. And so these, are definitely, the availability of housing has been a key issue for this council, which we're continuing to push forward. And part of that is, and I think Warden Jones and others have been around the table for a development working group that has kind of spurred out of the COVID economic task force that has been led by Peterborough and Kawarthas Economic Development, to hear from developers about what we can be doing better to facilitate their development, how the city or the county or staff can help move things along faster, or what is working well. So those conversations continue because as we see, people are buying houses with no inspection, over asking, and people are getting, kind of locked out of the market. So it's definitely something that I think is going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. But, aside from trying to facilitate development, it's hard there's not much else that we can really do concretely.
Thank you, Mayor Therrien. Warden Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe. Yeah, and I guess I have to say much the same Diane is saying. I mean, this crunch is going on in the county too. We're getting huge developments going on in the Millbrook area, in the Norwood area, Havelock area, all kinds of development. But the price of these homes, I have no idea how people are going to pull this off. Housing is probably one of our biggest priorities right now, and I know we all hear about geared to income housing, which to me is the important thing. Some of the rents that I'm hearing, and we call it affordable housing, like $2,700 a month or whatever numbers get bounced around. Who on earth can afford that? We need to get into more geared to income housing, and we need to really get a handle on this. The other angle here, if we pay our municipal taxes based on what your house is worth on the market, poor pity all of us. When they redo the numbers here shortly, none of us are going to be able to afford the taxes. So something's got to give here. I don't know how it got this carried away, but housing, as far as Peterborough County is concerned, we're joined at the hip, and we got to find a way to deal with this housing for everyday people.
Mr. Monsef.
You can call me Miriam, Joe. I've known you since Creative Cocktails were a thing in Peterborough. So you can call me Miriam. I'm one of yours, and I agree 100% with my colleagues. I would go as far as to say that aside from climate change, for our community, housing is our biggest limiting factor for our growth. And we're in the middle of a pandemic where we told people, stay home, work from home, learn from home, entertain yourself at home. Not everybody has a place to call home, and not every home is a safe home. And that's in my capacity as the women's minister. Since 2015, I've been able to work with partners locally to bring $45 million in federal funding to Peterborough to help renovate, to help subsidize, and to help construct 1,670 units of housing. We know that there are about 5 projects partners working with us to move forward. More to say on those soon. And the city put forward a pretty ambitious plan that I'm thrilled about. We're now talking about, 4-digit numbers in units to construct. We know about another 1,500 units that could move forward in the near future. I don't think that there's an issue more important than climate change for our community than housing. I will be there to work with any partner to advocate for units being built in our community. I agree we need the full spectrum of housing in our community, but at this point, given the supply and demand, every single new unit of housing is going to make a difference.
Thank you, Miriam. MPP Smith, what's your take?
Joe, we've come across what I would refer to as the perfect storm. We have a lack of inventory in the area. The places to grow legislation, the growth plan for Peterborough County as well as the city may not have kept up with what the realities are. When I was first elected, compared to today, we have about 10,000 more residents in this riding than when I was first elected. And we haven't had anywhere near that in construction. So it's put that many more strains on it. In order to have something affordable, you have to start with affordable land. The city itself is predominantly landlocked. Most of the developable land is in development now. So it means that when you want to build an apartment complex, you're buying 3, 4, 5 houses. The average price of the house now is $660,000. Just a few years ago, it was about $350,000. If you're spending $2 million now on property that you're going to raise the building on so that you can build an apartment complex, you have to have that many more apartments in it, and they have to be that much more expensive. So there's a whole host of things that we have to take a look at. There's no silver bullet. It's a series of dominoes that have fallen, and we need to set them all back up again so that we can move forward and make it more affordable for people.
Okay, thank you, MPP Smith. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. Obviously, as MPP Smith, the perfect storm, COVID certainly had an impact on what's happened with with what we're seeing in housing. But I want to talk about specifically about COVID recovery. The impact, and this question is going to go, Warden Jones, you're back at the top of the list. The impact of the pandemic on businesses has certainly not been even across all sectors. Even businesses within sectors have been hit to varying degrees. Essential operations like grocery stores have fared well, while bars, restaurants have had their operations drastically restricted, and performing arts venues, for example, have been completely shut down since this time last year. What should we do to ensure businesses in our hardest hit sectors have the supports they need for a strong recovery?
Well, thank you, Joe. I think the first thing we need to do is listen and listen to the actual reality needs of these small business owners, because they're the ones that keep Peterborough County together. Now, the mayor and we certainly participated in the mayor warden task force. And I guess a lot of the reason that, Dan, was that we would listen to people. Nobody had a magic button to push, but we could at least hear the concerns. And we did that. And we had many people join our Zoom meetings on that. And if nothing else, I think small business owners knew that we were listening. But sometimes it makes more than listening. And I think it behooves all of us to go out of our way and get on our knees and support local business, whether it's mom and pop's store in Apsley or whether it's something that lands down in Monaghan. We've got to look at this as a regional effort and support our small business. Don't be driving to Toronto, maybe. Let's support each other, and let's try to be as friendly as you are, Joe, by waving all the time. Thank you.
You're welcome. And certainly if anybody else wants me to call them, address them by another name, or please let me know. Miriam, it's on to you. Same question.
Joe, I want to thank all the business leaders, the employers in our community. You have had one heck of a year, and we appreciate you. You've held a lot together. You've kept people employed, and you've had to deal with your own personal challenges in the middle of this. we've got your back. We really do, and we need you to do well and thrive. So first thing we got to do is limit community spread and get everybody vaccinated. That's the first thing we got to do, because otherwise we're going to be in this stage for too long. There's going to be 8 million doses of vaccines available to Canadians by the end of this month, and more than 35 million cumulative by the end of June. Any Canadian who wants a vaccine will get one for free by September. And I want to thank frontline healthcare workers for helping to make that happen. And of course, our partners in public health and the volunteers who've stepped up, and our provincial colleagues. In addition to that, 234 businesses in our community were supported through our federal investments. That's the team at CFDC, for example, doing their work. That's protecting 1,400 jobs in our region. The CERB, nearly 1 in 4 Ontarian has got the CERB, and that's money people can spend in businesses. The CEBA loan, $16.35 billion of loans in Ontario were provided to 323,617 businesses. The wage subsidy, and this has been a lifeline, $23.32 billion in Ontario has helped protect 1.72 million jobs. High-speed internet is part of the effort, so is universal early learning and childcare.
Thank you, Miriam. MPP Smith.
Thanks, Joe. You're absolutely right. We've had a number of businesses who have suffered more than others. We have tried very hard to make sure that we're in a position where businesses will be able to reopen once we have COVID under control. Let's face facts. If we don't have companies that are employing people, our economy is not going to recover, because not only do people not have jobs, but they don't have any money that they can go spend someplace else. There's been a lot of things that have been done to try and keep businesses open, and I'll touch on one in particular. That's the Main Street program, and that was to take all of those small mom and pop stores that didn't have a web presence and get them a web presence. And we've seen some success from that, but it really comes down to us as consumers. Do we go to Costco? Do we go to Walmart? Do we shop on eBay? Or do we go to Watson and Lou? Do we go to my mom's attic? Do we go to all of the other small businesses in our community? Those are the people that sponsor our teams, that are there for us when we need something. They need us now. And what we need to remember as we move forward is it's our next door neighbor. It's our friend. It's not some nameless, faceless person on the internet. It's the guy next door to you. And yeah, it might be a little bit more inconvenient to have to go do curbside pickup than get it delivered. But what you're doing is you're supporting your neighbors and your friends. And please keep that in mind.
Thank you, MPP Smith. Mayor Therrien.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. This is certainly something I hear about a lot. And, you know, I live and work downtown. And I think, you know, there's been so many changes, and I certainly don't envy the provincial government and the decisions that need to be made at that level, because the unpredictability of this virus, I think, has been one of the most difficult aspects for all of us. And we know that our small businesses were ahead of the curve when it comes to health and safety protocols. And I know that, you know, it's gotten better now, but there was, you know, a lot of consternation that I heard concern about some of those big box stores that were, you know, allowed to remain open while small businesses weren't. So very glad that that has, that approach has changed. I think when moving forward, when we talk about restaurants in particular, from what I've heard and what I think it would be helpful, rather than having the 10-person cap, having something more related to square footage, because 10 people in the Petit Bar is a full restaurant. 10 people in One-Eyed Jack's is not really worth opening for. So, you know, there's ways to work with the small business community to hear about what makes sense for them as well. Again, very grateful to the support that the province and the feds have provided to our small businesses. And again, you know, they were the first ones, you know, downtown to have delineators on the floor to go this way, to have hand sanitizer, to put up, you know, plastic barricades. So we need to keep supporting them. And our community always does. Peterborough and City and County, we know that the local businesses are the backbone of our community. And so it's been great to see those businesses being supported continuously. So we just need to keep on doing that.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Therrien. So I'm going to switch gears again a little bit. As so far, we've had a lot of consensus here, but let me see if I can't, not division, but maybe some different takes on some things. This question is for you, Miriam, to start. There's no question that all levels of government have had to open the coffers and spend in order to keep our economy moving and assist people and businesses through the worst health crisis of our time. There are concerns that the significant amount of deficit spending from our governments, compounded with a likely decrease in future revenue as the economy slowly bounces back, will create a level of debt like never seen before. We're also hearing voices saying that the kind of debt that we're incurring, low interest debt owed to our central bank, really isn't a concern. Should we be concerned about the debt we're taking on? And if so, what is the plan to rein in spending and tackle the debt?
Joe, you're right. 8 out of $10 spent on the COVID response has come from the federal government. And you've heard the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister say, we're going to be here to support Canadians through this difficult time, whatever it takes, as long as it takes. And certainly we're mindful of the fiscal room we have, and certainly we're working to ensure that our economy comes roaring back on the other side of the pandemic. The consequence of not spending enough is actually greater than holding back dollars. Our investments, for example, in CERB, the wage subsidy, these all have been about saving lives and preventing our economy from scarring further. The wage subsidy, what it's done is keep employees close to their teams, and we still have one bill in the House of Commons that's stuck. It's got supports for businesses and parents, and political games are being played. So to the good advocates on this call, please reach out to our colleagues across the aisle. If you have contacts there, and get them to pass C14, the measures that were in the fall economic statement are still held up. In terms of the economic recovery for this country, our focus will be on growth. Our focus will be in a green and inclusive recovery. We will attempt to build back better what is clearly broken in some of our safety systems and foundational systems. And we will get Canada's workforce to be competitive so that we're also prepared for the next time something like this happens again.
Thank you, Miriam. MPP Smith.
Thanks, Joe. And I think that what you're seeing is where sometimes fiscal irresponsibility has caused a longer lasting effect. In Ontario, when we were first elected, our debt ratio was 40%, just slightly above 40%. It limited our ability then to borrow when you get into a pandemic. We came through some great economic times over the last 20 years, and we saw Ontario's debt balloon. Now we're in a position where we're not able to borrow like we should be to support people during this. In terms of the recovery, though, I think Ontario is very, very well positioned. The underlying economic factors to allow Ontario to recover were there, and we saw an increase in it. We've actually seen during COVID an increase in manufacturing jobs in the province. Premier Ford has come out and said, never again will Ontario be in a position where we rely on other jurisdictions for PPE. We've gone ahead through the Ontario Together Fund, and we have invested in that manufacturing in Ontario. GM, which closed the plant in Oshawa, retooled it, and they are now making more than 1 million masks a month. N95s, all 3 levels of surgical masks. We have a company in North Bay that is making, or in Thunder Bay, that is making vinyl gloves, something that wasn't done before. The underlying economic ability of this province will bring us back after we come out of COVID.
Thank you, MPP Smith. Mayor Therrien.
Thanks, Joe. And you can call me Diane. Yeah, so the city municipalities under the Municipal Act are, regulated in the amount of debt that we can incur, and the city has additional bylaws in place that are even more sort of conservative in our borrowing capacity. That said, at our budget deliberations back in November and December, and again, staff were sort of working all year round to prepare the budget. We had discussions about whether we should increase our cap on debt capacity because of those interest rates, and because, as we talked earlier, we have so many infrastructure projects that we need to fund. And the longer that you put those off, the more expensive they become. You know, we've talked about the increase in housing prices. Well, the cost of everything goes up year over year. So we're working to strike that balance to make sure that we're able to address the really critical infrastructure needs in the community while being aware of the debt load that we're carrying. Municipalities aren't permitted to run deficits. So, there's a lot of strategic thinking that goes into the budgets around that as well. I think at this point, we need people to be able to get through this pandemic. We need to be able to support folks to make sure that we all, come out hopefully stronger than before. And, so again, being rational and reasonable about the levels of debt that we're incurring, I think is something that all levels of government need to be considering.
Thank you. Warden Jones, what's your take?
Okay, thank you, Joe. And you can call me whatever you want to. Yeah, they've said it all. And the bottom line is that we are incredibly thankful to the federal and the provincial government for doing what they've done. Not an easy task. And I know the debt load is increasing. And I hear this from people all the time that, oh, boy, that money's going to dry up. Boy, we're going to be in trouble. But I'm not so sure. Let's look at it in a much more positive way. If we all do what we're supposed to do, and if we all can pinch our pennies to the best way we can, I think we're poised to see the economy boom once we get out of this mess and try to get back to normal. Now, one thing I hate seeing is fingers being pointed. And you hear this all the time. Let's point to the Prime Minister. Let's point at the Premier. Let's point at Dave Smith, which is kind of fun, but let's point at Miriam. I mean, get off this bandwagon. Everybody I've mentioned is doing the best that they can. So let's stop this negative vibe and find every reason you can to criticize them. The feds and the provincial government have gone out of their way to do the best they can for us. At Peterborough County, we've certainly kept our budget numbers as low as we possibly can. And we're going to get through it because we're all in this together.
Thank you, Murray. Diane, the next question, we'll start with you. It has to do with government procurement. Local businesses have told us that they feel left out of the local government purchasing process. Contracts are awarded to companies outside the region without local business being aware that the municipalities was even looking to purchase the product. Recognizing that there are government regulations for procurement, and I understand from the provincial government, what can municipalities do to ensure that local businesses are engaged and competitive when making purchases? And if we're going, and when we go to Miriam, to you, perhaps you could comment on what we can do to favor our own businesses, or if that's something we should do similar to what the Buy American regime is doing in the States.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So this has come up before, and as you said, there again are regulations and legislation that prohibit us from favoring local companies. So we're not allowed to do that. That said, if there are ways that we can engage local companies in a more fulsome way, I'm happy to have that discussion. I know that there's been a report requested from this council. It would have been well over a year ago now, to try to talk more about social procurement and about how we might be able to implement some of those types of ideals that are used. Calgary is a good example. And again, different provinces have different municipal jurisdictions and legislation. So you can't quite compare them, but there's definitely examples out there that we can look at that bring some of those perspectives and ideals into the procurement process, given the limitations that we have as a municipality. But again, if there are businesses that want to reach out to me to talk about how we might be able to better engage them, please do. I'm happy to have that conversation. And because that's not, my area of expertise. So I'm here to learn from you about what is going to make it easier and what is going to kind of bridge that gap in communication.
Thank you, Diane. Murray.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, when it comes to this, I think the concept of working together is extremely important. We at the county, we reach out to our 8 municipalities, and people sometimes tend to forget that we have those 8 individual municipalities with their own life and their own structure and their own priorities, and we try to meld them together into what we call Peterborough County. But we work very hard at trying to get all the townships together and try to make much more sense out of our buying techniques, things of that nature. So we go out of our way to do that. We're always very willing to meet with any small business in the city or the county and help them do business with Peterborough County, because we do indeed do a fair bit of business in a variety of ways. And the other thing we need to think of is city and county, together. Of course, much more business activity in the city. That's a penetrating look into the obvious. But we got to remember there's 60,000 people out there outside the city limits. And I always say there is life outside the city limits. If you ever took those 60,000 people away from the economy of the city, I think you'd be in awful big trouble. So let's not forget the importance of what Peterborough County has to offer as they come over the border into Diane land. We have a lot to offer. Let's not forget Peterborough County. I just vented.
Well, you're talking to Norwood boy here, Murray, so I certainly agree and echo that. Miriam, on to you.
In my day-to-day procurement lately has been about procuring sanitizers and masks and gowns and vaccines and the needles, and I get to watch Anita Anand do that work. And before COVID, procurement had been about how do we diversify suppliers so that there's better results, but also it's a really strong policy lever to support small and medium-sized businesses, as well as Black-owned, Indigenous-owned, woman-owned, racialized-owned businesses that we all have to do more to lift up. So at the federal level, we're certainly working towards that, and we're hosting, if folks are interested, there's a small business information expo being hosted by Public Works and the Government of Canada on April 14th and 15th. If help with financing, hiring, doing business with government and exporting, if people want more information about that, please reach out to my constituency office. The federal government does a lot of procurement, of course, but during COVID, one of the things, and I think one of our colleagues mentioned it earlier, is the more we buy from Canada, that made in Canada portfolio that we've opened, from biomanufacturing to otherwise, the stronger our economy will be. And we should be working towards sovereignty while maintaining our commitment to do our part globally.
Thank you, Miriam. MPP Smith.
Thanks, Joe. You can call me Dave. Procurement is one of the biggest things with government. And I'm going to give a perfect example of something that we found when we first came into government, and we have made a wholesale change on it. Let's say that you're in North Kawartha and you've been into a significant car accident. The Peterborough paramedics come pick you up in the ambulance. They bring you to PRHC. On the way in, they put an IV into you. You get to the emergency room and they determine that you need to be airlifted. So the orange ambulance comes and lands. You go into the orange ambulance helicopter, they remove that IV and they put a new one in because they have a contract with a different provider. You have that IV that there was nothing wrong with it. You probably still had 2 or 3 hours worth of fluid in it, but they have to put another one in. They fly you to Toronto General. They land on the roof and you come out, and the first thing they do is they remove that IV that has been in for about half an hour, and they put a new one in because they have a different contract with a different provider. And this is one of the challenges that we face in government is you have to honor contracts, but you have to do it in an intelligent way. And we're going to a central procurement on things like that so that we don't have that. And it also means that it's safer for the individual because there's every time you put the needle in, you have an opportunity for infection.
Okay, thank you, Dave. We have 2 questions left. So for the next one, we're going to Warden Jones, Murray, sorry, for the next one. And what I'd like to know, this has to do with vacationing and people coming here, tourism. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce Ontario Economic Report showed that the tourism industry in the Kawarthas fared better than some other regions in Ontario and Canada.
I'm on. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. I think I missed the last half of that question, Joe.
Okay,
You were talking too much.
Okay, here we go. I'll slow it down. Murray, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce Economic Report showed that tourism industry in the Kawarthas fared better than many other areas in Ontario and Canada. Many people chose to travel and vacation within the province, and Kawarthas provided the gateway that many were seeking. However, the message from many government leaders was to stay at home. So the question now is, should the Kawarthas be welcoming to visitors from around Ontario this summer?
We take our lead from the medical officer of health. And I know I took a lot of heat for this in the early stages of COVID. We, Diane and I were together on this as well with that message. And so was Dave, so was Miriam, about please, we're trying to stop this virus. It's got nothing to do with not wanting you to come to the Kawarthas. It's got nothing to do whether we want you to come to your cottage or not. It's about trying to stop the virus and not spread it elsewhere. The same is true with us going to Whitby or whatever. The same was true. So we made the very solid decision at the beginning of this that we're going to follow the advice of our medical officer of health. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Of course, we want the tourism. That's what makes Peterborough County. Of course, we want them with open arms. But I know I went through a lot of flack with, I had to get my phone changed because I was getting so many calls with threats that I was trying to stop them from coming to the area. Well, yeah, I was trying to stop them because I didn't want to see everybody get sick. So that's the gist of it. When the time is right, I'll stand out there on the 115 at the county sign and I'll wave the flag. But it's nothing to do with not wanting them. It's everything to do with let's stop this damn virus right now.
Miriam.
Yeah, let's stop this damn virus right now. And when the day comes, J. Murray Jones, I will be there with you waving the welcome to Peterborough Kawartha sign. This is the land of the shining waters. This is the place at the end of the rapids. And why wouldn't you want to come here? But as J. Murray Jones said, our number one responsibility is protecting the health and safety of our residents. And we will continue to rely on science and the good work of Dr. Salvatera, the team at Public Health. And, you know, it's good to know that tourism is doing well in Peterborough despite the challenges. What I would put forward as a challenge to the builders and to the developers and to leaders in our community is people want to buy cottages here. People want to live here year-round and seasonally. So let's build those cottages. There's money to be made. There's wealth to be shared. And there are new residents to welcome here on the other side of COVID. So get going on those plans and start building, getting those shovels in the ground. For our tourism sector as a whole, Joe, I want to say that we've got some good news coming for tourism operators as well, with funds to help them adapt and reopen. They're going to be renovating their spaces and their businesses. And this will be an agreement, a partnership with the entire region. More news to come on that, but tourism employs some of the more vulnerable workers in our communities, and it's a big part of the vitality of our community. So we've got plans to support it further, but for the time being, stay home orders are stay home orders, and they save lives.
Thank you, Miriam. Dave.
Thanks, Joe. We are 6 days away from a budget. So all I can say on that is stay tuned. You only have to wait 6 days. Minister McLeod has said it, I think, the best. The hospitality and tourism industry was hit first, hit hardest, and will hit be hit the longest. It's going to take a lot of time to get that consumer confidence back up, to get people to come back. As Warden Jones said, it's not that we don't want you to be here. We don't want you to come here and get sick. We'd like you to be able to come back, enjoy the Peterborough and the Kawarthas and all we have to offer, but we can't have you come back and enjoy it as long as COVID is going on. We can't have that risk. Let's think about all of us, not just think about me. And when we think about all of us and how we can do things together, the virus only moves with people. It can't fly, it can't walk, it can't run, it doesn't drive a car. If we keep the virus in one location, it dies. So take the opportunity to kill the virus, go to war with it, stay home for now, and we'll welcome you back with open arms. I'm not sure that Jay on the side of the road is going to entice people to come up, but if that's what he wants to do, that's fine.
Diane.
Yeah, not a whole lot to add that hasn't already been said. I think part of the frustration that folks felt, and that certainly the warden and I heard early on, was, our communities, people in our communities aren't allowed to see their loved ones, aren't allowed to celebrate birthdays or other types of events. So to see other people traveling and, having vacations and that kind of thing bred a little bit, of not resentment, well, maybe resentment, but also, lack of clarity around, the rules. And so, we've had the consistent messaging since the beginning. It does, unfortunately have that negative impact on our tourism, our arts and culture sector, which, are such a huge driver in our economy. Again, this is happening to communities across the province. But it's about balancing that. We want to make sure, again, that we stop the virus, that we're able to hopefully, and again, you asked about this summer, Joe, and the unpredictability, as I mentioned before, is something that we don't know. So it will depend on vaccines. It'll depend on the variants. It'll depend on the numbers, on whether or not we are, ready to safely welcome people back here. Again, we want to, but we want to avoid at all costs spreading the disease, having to go back into a lockdown. I think that's something that everybody shares. So, we're again, following the science, following the best practices and advice of our medical officers, and decisions will be made based on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Diane. And yeah, I'm sure everybody can agree on that point. We would like to see the backside of these lockdowns for sure. My final question, and Murray, you gave a little segue into this. I want to switch gears now a little bit and talk about what it's like to be a politician, not just the policies that you're making or your parties are making. And it has to do with social media. And you mentioned the flack that you've been getting. 25 years ago, when the internet was becoming accessible to the public, one of the big assumptions was the internet would have a very beneficial effect on politics through an easy exchange of ideas. Rational, reasoned discussion would elevate good ideas, while bad ones would be discarded. While the internet has likely spawned some good debates, when we think of the intersection of politics and the internet, we often think of vile mudslinging, insults, and fake news. Everyone is aware, I believe, at least to some degree, what our politicians appear to be subjected to on a regular basis. Although it may be impossible to quantify, I can't help but wonder if we've lost some good politicians who would rather not work in this environment, or possibly has this environment dissuaded otherwise good people from public service. And I would just like you to comment, what would you say to a young person who is considering public service as an elected official, but is concerned about this negative online environment? Can public service still be rewarding despite this environment? Miriam, first question goes to you.
Well, to anybody considering public service, I would say we are so fortunate to live in a country where that is even open to us. So go for it. It's not easy. These are difficult jobs, but we know that going into them. Going into them, though, we're also surrounded by a pretty spectacular team. I think all of us can say that. That's how we get here. And to be at the decision-making table at a time like this, when my community is hurting so much, and when there are so many opportunities for us on the other side of COVID, it's a privilege, and it's worth all the hardship. And if I may say, it's worth all the crap. Disinformation is dangerous online and it has cost lives. The bullying that happens online, it's killing little girls and little boys and we're losing them to suicide. And we are losing good politicians. I know across the country, municipal, provincial politicians who left politics because they said, I don't need this. I was just trying to do good. And now my life is being threatened and my kids are under surveillance and they walk away. And yeah, we will lose good people. But more dangerously, Joe, look at what happened down south on January 6th. The rhetoric that politicians engage in our own legislatures, the rhetoric that we engage and allow online, it spills into our streets. It spills into really dangerous ways, hurting too many of us and hurting our democracy. And so, yes, young, racialized, and women politicians disproportionately experience higher rates of violence on social media, but our sons and daughters are watching. And the message that it sends them is do not stand up, do not raise your voice, do not try to lead, because when you do, you will be silenced. So, as someone who used to be a Peter tweeter, Joe, I won awards, but more importantly, I was part of that Twitter community that Peterborough had built. I believe in the power of internet to bring us together and to mobilize. And it's up to every single one of us to make sure that those spaces are safe for all of us and to call out the crap when it happens, because it's an assault on our democracy every time it happens.
Thank you, Miriam. Dave.
I think the internet had great potential when it first was opened up to the world in 93 or so. But what we're seeing with social media is that there's nothing social about social media. Myself, I predominantly use it as an electronic billboard. I don't engage in conversations with people on it because it is very, very destructive. A lot of the companies have gone to an AI model now where they're looking for things that could interest you based on things that you have said or that you have done. And what we're seeing now is that as a result of it, you end up with a large echo chamber where people who are like-minded with something that is very obscure or untrue find a great audience for it. Before, if you were walking downtown Peterborough with 80,000 people and you said something that was completely outrageous, you may have had a half dozen people hear you. Now, with the advent of social media, that same individual can come out with something that is completely outrageous, completely false, and find 1 million people who like it and agree with it. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what we see now is there is a lot of attacks. There is a lot of vicious comments. People who at one point in their lives probably were very, very reasonable are no longer. I used to joke about hockey moms and how they would step in the arena and they could lose their mind. Hockey dads, very much the same thing. Now we're seeing it all over social media. People who are reasonable in their regular life have no repercussions. They step forward on the internet and they are vicious.
Thank you, Dave. Diane.
Thanks, Joe. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason I deleted Facebook. It's quite toxic. I will say, I mean, I've heard from people who sort of see some of the attitudes and the comments on social media. So I think we do lose good politicians, good potential politicians, because they see particularly some of the misogynistic comments and basically are like, why would you want to do that? I've been doxxed in the past since I've been mayor. I've had, violent threats my way. I'm tough. I handle it, but it sucks. And I think that one of the things that we need to do, because as Miriam said, we all came into this with a team and we had people that helped us with social media. And then when you're elected, particularly at the municipal level, a lot of that sort of goes away. And so we do need to stand up for one another. We do need people that support us to do that publicly online, because it can be very isolating and lonely for sure, especially when that disinformation gets out. But again, we need people that are able to stand up to it and kind of tolerate it, because we do want to set examples. I've had people say, my daughter sees you on TV and says, I can be the mayor one day. And that's the message that I'm hoping to convey. And, it does harm when people are, posting things to the opposite effect on social media. So as Dave said, it's, has a very sort of corrosive effect. It can be used for good, but certainly some days it doesn't necessarily feel like that.
Thank you, Diane. Murray.
Well, thank you. Corrosive is probably a good word. And all these comments that I've heard from the three of you is exactly the reason I don't have anything to do with it. I think it is totally obnoxious, some of the comments I see come out. People think they have the right to lie and to be rude. I don't have anything to do with it. Matter of fact, Dave and Diane and Miriam, I think I replied to a text from them once, but I'm not sure if I even did it right. From the county's perspective, of course, we have a social media presence and we do the best we can do to communicate, and that's what it's meant for. But my goodness, I've seen people responding to some of our messages, and I just can't believe that they would do this. I guess maybe I'm old school or something, but who on earth do you think you are that you can make that kind of a comment to people like us or to anybody? I just don't get it. So I don't have anything to do with social media, very little anyway, and I'll continue to do it. And I see Diane with a guitar in the background. Her comments struck a chord with me. Thank you.
Joe, I can confirm that
Well said.
Jay did email me a text message to my tweet book.
Very good. And absolutely, I'm sorry that we don't have your presence on Twitter, Murray, because I'm sure it would be very entertaining and fulfilling if we did. But listen, on my behalf, on behalf of the chamber and everybody watching, I want to thank all of you for attending today and for your service to your community, your province, and your country. While technology is making things like this possible, and we're grateful for that, we certainly look forward to seeing all of our elected officials in Power Hour 2022 and discussing the great COVID recovery of 2021. Thank you again. You may applause now.
Thanks, Joe. Great job.
Back to you, Stu.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate all of your work that you put into this today. You did a great job serving as moderator. And thank you, Jay, Diane, Dave, Miriam, for making the time today as well. And thank you for taking the time to do the one-on-one think tank interviews that we recorded in advance. For those people watching, those interviews and today's Power Hour are all available on Cogeco Your TV, and you'll also find links on our website as well. Thank you, Matt Wickham, speaking of Cogeco, and David Feely, all of the team at Your TV for your ongoing support. And thank you to our other sponsors, Cherney Realty, Cody and James, Chartered Professional Accountants, Peterborough and District Construction Association, Merit Precision Moldings, MicroH Peterborough and Whitby, Canopy Support Services, and TD. Don't forget, our Chamber AGM is coming up on the 31st. It's at 11 a.m. Our guest speaker will be Trevin Stratton. Trevin is the Chief Economist and Senior VP of Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and he'll be taking a look at a post-COVID economy. Should be interesting. Thank you all for participating in the 2021 Power Hour.